everyone. Welcome to another episode of Speculative Speculations. I'm Varsha.
I'm Steve.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Dan.
And this is a series where we talk about sci-fi/speculative stories in all their forms. Today's discussion is going to be focused on up to the end of part 5 of Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It's the first book of the trilogy of the same name. The short story for today is Tlon Uqbar Orbis Tertius by Jorge Luis Borges. And that's going to be a fun discussion because I'm still unknotting my brain from that short story this morning. The short story for next week is going to be by Clifford D. Simak. It's called Desertion. And as always, it's the next short story in the big book of science fiction, which is what we're following along on this podcast. And we're going to be talking through the end of Children of Time next week. So in the sections we read today, the spiders discovered all the side effects of religion. They discovered dogma and intolerance and holy war. And I switched over firmly to Team Spider because I'm tired of the humans and their damn guns.
Not all the humans are bad, though.
Yeah.
Mostly they're just a couple of crazies which are manipulating other people as it happens, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
That's true. And they are in charge somehow.
Yeah. I sort of feel like the human story is like trying to pick your favourite out of a really bad bunch because they're all megalomaniacs in their own little ways. They all think they're right. They all have their own agendas. And all of them are intent on destruction of some form or other and not really living in coexisting in peace. Now, there are reasons for that because they are like literally living on a time bomb. You know, something that day by day is becoming less and less suitable for them to survive on. But at the same stage, they've devolved quite badly.
And I think that's part of the intent, right? I feel like it has been from the beginning, showing while the spiders evolve, the humans are sort of devolving to their same level. And at various points, I think they are practically on level ground so that there are these immense parallels between the two races that we are following. But it's kind of, and I don't mean this as a criticism of the book, it's just I'm talking about the emotions it's evoking in me. It's really sad and painful to watch the humans do that to themselves. And yeah, especially the last bit with Lane's like, bring out the guns, we're gonna, like, you're a damn engineer, you should know what that would do to the spaceship. Like, enough with the guns.
Yeah, but like the crazy cult leader thing, it also doesn't sound very good to let happen.
It doesn't, but I think I don't know why Holston in the end decided to side with Lane rather than Nguyen, but it wasn't all terrible. Sure, he might destroy the systems, but you don't have proof of it yet. Do you have enough proof to go killing everybody who is just an innocent follower of him?
Well, I don't think they want to kill everyone else, they want to kill him.
But they were prepared to. They were prepared to if they had to, and I think they did even.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think what changed for Holston was when he said that all the people that died on the moon is like, oh, they deserve it, right?
They were deserters.
It's like at that point, like, are you gonna let the psychopath be in charge of your whole ship?
Yeah.
Sounds.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think you get to a point where if you're, because in their minds there is no Earth, and they're it for the human race. So I think there's not a whole lot of room for subtlety. There's a lot of desperation, and they all think that they're right, so they're willing to do whatever it takes to continue the human race. But I do think it's Holston. I kind of feel like I think most people would kind of flip-flop back and forth and spend time with one group, and well, that kind of makes sense, and spend time with the other group, and well, I can see where you're coming from. That sounds right. So I'm sure it's a very desperate and difficult situation to be in.
I mean, isn't that what he said? Right? He said himself, was like, oh yeah, he was kind of starting to see his way until he said that. He was like, he's ready to, it's like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense. And I was also like, oh yeah, it's starting to make sense. But then it was like, I don't know. Dangerous.
Yeah. But it's like
Yeah,
Varsha was.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it's like Varsha was saying at the start. Though the two stories are complete parallels of each other because they are led by what they think is a singular voice. And while we have some insight into Kearns' voice as being again this devolving mad person in some ways, like again her megalomaniac ideas of setting up her own civilization and protecting them from the war is kind of a parallel to obviously Goyen. But then you have, which I thought was also very jarring, this kind of new breed of human that had been born and raised in the ship, but they were basically just the ant workers that were had the hoods up, had the garb on, and were just silently following orders as far as the design went. And the two things are like one is eerie and the other one's not, even though they're sort of broadly the same thing that's happening. I just think it's really, really interesting parallel to kind of jump between.
I think the difference is because one, the trajectory is ascending, one the trajectory descending.
Yeah.
So you're like, the other one, you're like, oh, there's hope for it to be better. We don't know what's going to happen. The other one, like, oh, well, I kind of know how it's going to happen.
Yeah, that's a great point because I think thousands of years of history, it feels like, has taught them nothing. But I think I agree with you, Steve. I think we do have to take into account the fact that they are in something of a desperate circumstance, and that will very much affect the psychological state of everybody involved. I mean, I don't know if this is valid, but I've started to read it as like everybody's just gone crazy and they're doing whatever it is they think they need to do to survive or whatever they think is best for some definition of best. But it's still like when you build the full picture, it is very unflattering and I think sadly accurate, probably. So yeah, I think that's why it's difficult to read, but it makes sense overall for the story, for the characters. I think it does make sense.
I think part of it is too is that their hubris that they would go into hypersleep while the work was being done. And they would kind of leapfrog because they wanted to be the ones to see this through. They didn't just start the foundation and grow with and pass the baton off to someone else, and to be a part of that progress and to see it through. Because they would get things started and it's like, okay, I'll be back, and they would disappear. So they don't really have their fingers on the pulse of what's really going on because they just see snapshots through time.
Yeah.
And there's been generations now, so I think they have a warped. They don't really have a full picture of what's happened the whole time. They see bits and pieces, but they don't see the whole picture. And I think that's part of it, is that they haven't been a part of all the work the whole time.
Yeah, I like how you put that. And I think another thing that disturbed me a little bit, again, I think accurately so, is I would think that when you've gone out on this Ark ship and with the hope of like forwarding humanity, the next generation would bring hope. But then to see the next generation sort of put to use, their minds basically destroyed like that, I think that, yeah, that was just really sad and pathetic. It was. I think it hurt. It was very disturbing overall that there were children there they've like sort of devolved to this. They're in a spaceship, but they've devolved to living like cave people. I think that was very, I guess, well done, but deeply disturbing.
That puts you against, right, what's the name of the crazy guy?
Ryan?
Guyen?
Yeah, right. Because it's like all of this is, even like the scientists, like what right do you have to manipulate these people? Even if you scientists, even if you gave them life, or if he woke them up from the sleeping pods and everything else, like what right do you have to do all that? I guess even if you create life, you don't have right to do whatever you want with it.
He justifies the decisions by saying that you need a singular vision to lead humanity, to lead everyone. You cannot have like a committee. You cannot. But see, and maybe this will be true, I don't know, but committee assumes posturing and political maneuvering. That's when committees are ineffective. But when everybody's working sincerely towards the same goal, I don't think they're a bad thing. So I like the parallel between Nguyen and Kern there, because I think when the spiders ask her for advice, and I don't know if it's their interpretation or this is what she tells them, that they need to bring war. Effectively, that's how they decide to interpret her message, that they must bring war to to the dissidents and destroy all of them. I feel like that is very telling of like what happens if you follow a mad god. And Nguyen is human, but he's like, and yeah, the god you follow without mindlessly could be another human who's taken on too much power for himself, or like if you're willing to go that direction, whatever godly attributes you give to the people you worship as part of your religion.
Yeah, it's kind of like you always need some sort of check to replay power, I guess.
It's also a. I mean, maybe it's because we read these two sections together back to back. It sometimes sort of condenses your thoughts. It's a phenomenally political book. Like, the book is just all politics and like bigger ideas. Like this idea that both of these worlds are exploring other functions of government. So we're looking at dictatorship, we're looking at meritocracies, we're looking at all those kind of things. But there's no real democracy in either society. And actually, this idea of free will and choice, a lot of things that we've been talking about quite recently, right across a lot of books, is absent in both cases. Even the humans, opposition is actually 3 or 4 individuals, who just happen to be heads of departments. Same within the planet, though they're like great houses, or the peer houses, as they're talking about, control the society. And there's that under people that literally live on the ground, that is just husks of bodies, and all this kind of very unjust society there as well. But as you quite rightly say, Dan, like, they're on the rise, and you can see a hope for them fixing that, going through the problems and coming out the far side, where it just feels like the death of a civilization up above.
But do you think it justifies it, like the spider society? It's like the way their society structured is also deeply interconnected to their biology, right? And how they were at the beginning. Does it somewhat justify it, do you think?
I sort of had it that because you try and draw parallels between the development of humankind, right, and where the spiders are at, and obviously it's kind of, they make this point very much towards the end, that they've got radio and stuff, but they haven't invented the wheel, so they've skipped steps. But the spider society is very feudal, so like that 1800s, the Dark Ages period of humankind, where they're very much kind of exerting dominance over another one, and they're fighting for resources, they're fighting holy wars, as Varsha quite already said. All those things that happened around humankind at that stage in our development is exactly what's happening here. There is the street urchins, there is the people that are lesser in society, there are people that are not needed, and cast aside as they'll never amount to anything. So there's no point including them in society. So I think it's really interesting to look at that, and in some cases it's only hinted at through the character of Fabian, because he's the only viewpoint we get of any of that side of the world, and have got of any of that side of the world at this point, because we just have been sent through Portia, or who otherwise you're kind of the ruling class in some ways.
Yeah, I think Fabian's like storyline is my favorite of all the ones, because just reading what like that part and the whole like male versus female point, I guess, or discussion, it just reminded me so much, and obviously it's intentional, it just reminded me so much of all the things you read from like late 1800s, early 1900s, of like on a colonist in Africa, or like, and he's saying, oh, this slave that I educated, he's smart, he's different than all the other savages, right? So, I'm giving, you're living in a nice house and everything, but you're different than them. They don't deserve anything, right? It's so, I guess, clear, and I don't know, the parallels are very clear.
Yeah, it's very chilling, isn't it? I like a lot of the same language about even when Portia's talking to Fabian. I don't know what you're complaining about. You have it quite good, as if like that's exactly the same language as we use in slavery in America, for instance. About certain people, you shouldn't be complaining because you have it good. Whereas, it's not really about the individual, it's about the systemic kind of culture that you've set up.
And she doesn't realize, like Portia doesn't realize it. It's not like she's evil or anything, right? She just doesn't understand what problem he has. And the same, and again, someone reading this book would say, well, they're genetically different, right? They're actually different, so this doesn't apply to our history because, they're different, so that makes sense. That's what the same thing they were saying at the time with, like, I don't know, racism, phrenology, and all those things, right? Like, scientifically, we're different, so it makes sense that some are more advanced than other ones. But yeah, it's framed in a very smart way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who thinks that this is not about human history has to be kidding themselves. And it is framed as a gender discrepancy, but it could apply to pretty much any form of inequality in human society. And gender was one of them, sure, but also the ones that you brought up, Dan. There's racism and casteism, I'm sure. And they don't deserve it. Like, whatever arguments you want to throw out, like they don't have a soul, or they don't have a brain, they can't think for themselves. Whatever excuse will make you happy to feel superior. We've used that in the past as collective humanity. So yeah, this is very much about human history for sure.
Yeah, it feels very quintessential sci-fi, as in a reflection to our society. Very classical. Very well done, because it's exploring a lot of different topics, not just one topic. It's doing a lot of different things, right? And they're all interesting to explore through the lens of the spider society, right?
And you get to watch Fabian make his point about how poor it is to be a man in this world, while also him not realizing that his use of the ants and the possum beetles is again his use and abuse of an underclass as well, and not seeing the ill and the problems of that, at again multi-level and that kind of different levels of racism that happened throughout time, of people between class, but people would kind of also not recognize that how they're being treated, they're passing on to other people as well.
There's also technically criticism you could levy, I guess, to the way it's framed, like the Fabian versus the female conflict, in the fact that, a lot of, I don't know what to call it, a lot of people say that this sort of class or struggle or gender struggle, stuff like that, it has to somewhat resolve at some point violently. Like it's very rarely that just by discussing it's possible to solve it. So here, in a sense, just by discussing or showing that he was smart, he managed somewhat to convince them, and also by bargaining. But in a real world, some would argue that that's probably never happened or very rarely happened, and it usually has to come through some sort of violent uprising or rebellion or something that then brings some change. But yeah, again, this was written a while ago, so. And it's arguable. So,
Did anyone else see Portia as Galileo?
I thought more the Bianca
who
got
I'm sorry.
imprisoned. Yeah. But yes.
Was it this Bianca, or was it a previous Bianca that was looking for a telescope at the moon? I don't remember.
I think it was the most current Bianca, the one that Fabian ran away with.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think
bad choice of words, but
but to that point, Steve, it is kind of that kind of everything that's good that happens or progress that really happens is at a scientific level. But scientists are also the heretics of. It was a bit like the witch trials and stuff that was going on with Bianca, I thought, when she was locked up, because she was kind of investigating in things that people didn't really understand, that she had some sort of understanding. People thought she was either dangerous or practicing things that she really shouldn't. And again, another mirror of things that happened within humanity.
Yeah. And I think it was interesting, though, that it didn't just put, like, scientists versus religion, because religious people were also somewhat of scientists, which is very much what happened in our world, too.
Yeah.
So that was a nice touch, I thought.
Well, I think it starts off with science, and then it devolves into something else, like
The mix.
into
Yeah.
power and a struggle, and then they kind of lose sight of that and get stuck in the way that they're surviving and the way that they think things should be done or what they believe, and it prevents them from. But yeah, there's a lot of parallels between the spiders and the humans in this story, and it makes you wonder how humans got this far, because you would imagine that I think humans will find a way to screw it up, right? They'll find some way to screw this up.
And it ultimately ends in, and I thought this bit was actual genius, given the state of society. It actually addressed the whole nuclear issue and the idea that you can have the ultimate weapon that nobody wants to use. Like Fabian and Viola are standing there kind of really fighting with themselves, saying, we don't actually want a conflict at this point. We want the threat of this to be enough to get our aims, but we don't want to have to press the button, and then them being relieved when they don't have to. They take it so far, do a couple of test runs, whatever, kind of show the devastation of the power that they have, and ultimately win a war that way. But in doing so, kind of create this real threat on their entire society going forward. Like, it's just, yeah, I just thought that was so clever how you frame it that differently, so that it's not obviously a nuclear parallel, but have the questions at the very end just be exactly that.
Cool.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I didn't think of it quite like that, but that makes so much sense. I didn't head in that direction at all, but yeah, I do like that the spiders. We're heading towards the last quarter of the book now, but with the spiders are actively stopping themselves from trying to kill other spiders, which I would imagine humans try to do at various points in history. I'm not sure, but then also it escalated to the point of the nuclear bomb. So I wonder if we'll see the spiders, their restraint, help the humans be nice to each other. I don't know. I hope that's the direction the story takes, but I don't know.
Well, the reason they don't want to kill each other is due to the virus, right? Because otherwise they would be, by nature, they're killing each other all the time. I guess it's sort of like they're implanted this a similar sense to what humans have to try to work together in a bit more stricter sense, I guess.
Kind of like their Black Death or like their big event.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had similar trajectories and similar.
I wonder why they
issues.
couldn't, when the Black Death happened, right? Why weren't they able to? Because it said that they tried injecting the blood, or like sort of like it seemed like vaccine. Well, I guess it wasn't vaccine because they didn't do it before they got sick. But I guess they weren't able to isolate viruses because they couldn't see that small.
Oh, I sort of read that different. I read that they only got it to work because they identified the nanovirus, and the nanovirus was how they were going to use as a carrier for the basic treatment to work. An isolated thing without piggybacking on. It's a bit like modern vaccines at work as well at the moment. You kind of need to introduce it in the body that it's not seen as invasive. It's seen as being piggybacked on something else, so your genetic code gets rewritten in some ways and you build up natural tolerance. So my reading was that they used and identified that there was an nanovirus, this kind of thing that they all had, that we knew was an nanovirus, and that they were able to piggyback the vaccine and the blood or the antibodies that they found in other people on the back of that nanovirus, because that's the thing they all shared in common.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering why they didn't get to making vaccines at that point if they were able to find virus stuff like that, but maybe they just didn't get to that. Okay.
Yeah, and there was some note there somewhere about how immunity doesn't work the same way in spiders as it did in mammals. Yes. But yeah, there was a whole lot of elaboration on that.
I guess because they don't have the same antibody generation, but I don't know how spiders work.
Yeah, I would, if I could pick Tchaikovsky's brain, I would ask what kind of research went into this.
I'm sure he did a lot of research. I guess we don't have bones, so we didn't have like bone marrow that can generate antibodies and stuff like that. Maybe they're just, completely vulnerable to any sort of disease, because who cares? We're just spiders, we're just gonna reproduce, sort of. I don't know.
Well, yeah, they shelled and molt, don't they? So they kind of repeatedly, will change their skin in ways that we don't really. Our regeneration happens on the inside, and theirs would sort of seem to happen on the outside of their bodies, a bit like you said. So yeah, I think that'd be really interesting.
Spider antibodies. Let me Google.
3 articles by Adrian Tchaikovsky, you'll find.
No, it's talking about using spiders to make antibodies or something.
A lot of people watch too much Spider-Man. Yeah, you see that the radioactive spider bites you and you get superpowers. Like, everybody knows that.
So you know how they published a bunch of papers after what's the word? Why can't I? The graphics for Interstellar were made. I wonder if Tchaikovsky did something similar with spider anatomy for this one.
Oh yeah, I remember
why spiders.
Sorry,
Right?
Steve, go ahead.
No, why spiders? I wonder why he chose spiders.
Maybe because they're so far away from us, and so much like a lot of people see them instantly repulsed. That such a big difference, and making that you identify with them, like the dichotomy makes the, I guess, parallels even stronger. Probably. That's how I would think about it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because my assumption reading this book is that he would use the fact that it was a spider for more horrific, to scare the reader. But that is not the way this book is really presented at all. It's very much about an empathy with the spider and understanding the spider and how they could evolve in a similar way to humanity with the right kind of genetic makeup or environment or otherwise. So it is interesting. I would just sort of think that he just somebody that grew up as a young boy and really liked bugs. There's plenty of people that are like that.
If it was just monkeys, right, would it have been as like, if you see them go through all the stages of civilizations, would it have felt as impactful?
No.
I don't think so.
It creates a far better byline, I think, for us to sell a book, though, as well, doesn't it? You go and say, we're going to do this thing about monkeys, and you're like, oh, God, what, another one of those? Like, at least do dinosaurs. Dinosaurs was cool. Jurassic Park's cool book. Do that. He said, what about if it's spiders? And like,
yeah. I thought also, too, that it was going to be horrific and everything, but actually not.
It's the humans that are horrific in this.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, I kept thinking, when I was reading it, or when I kept thinking about the book, I kept thinking that it was called Children of Men, but that's a different book. But it also made sense in my mind. I was like, they're both children of men. But it's not, actually. Also, did anyone, while reading the part about the Gilgamesh thing at the beginning, where it was the sleeping pods and everything, I kept thinking about this movie I saw about this arc of going through space and someone... but I don't remember what the name is. I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days and Googling it, and I can't find it. I saw it on Netflix. I don't know if anyone can remember.
You thinking about Pandorum?
I don't know. There was one that I remember, the circular ship, and someone awakens inside. I'm not sure if I'm thinking about two different movies at that point, but I also remember one which is all inside the whole movie is shot inside.
Yeah.
It's that one.
Yeah, it's Pandorum.
Is it Pandorum?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay. I'll double check after, because I've been trying to figure it out this whole time. It reminded me a lot of that sort of thing. But horror sci-fi? No, it's not horror. It's horror, the one you're thinking about?
Science fiction horror, I guess you could say.
No, it's not that one.
No.
I'll keep searching then.
Oh.
Yeah, because the whole movie is shot inside one of the coffins, and she's inside the coffin. The whole movie. The sleeping pod, I guess. No coffin, but okay.
That sounds
and it's
fantastic.
not a horror. So she lives inside a coffin.
What?
It's a thriller. It's not a coffin, I guess. It's a sleeping pod. I think. Okay, anyways, I'll find it and I'll post it somewhere.
So I'm really interested to see. Obviously, the stuff that makes this book really interesting is this evolution thing, and how he uses time jumps to like shock the reader into, or accentuating the differences through time jumps. Like, for instance, when Holston wakes up and the apostates and people are changing, the children are growing up. It's such a jarring thing because even the reader's going, "Oh, what's going on? The cult has taken over. Who's in that place?" Once it gets back past that state, like, how does this story and this function work? In much the same way, like, I'm really interested to see how this wraps up. It sort of feels like it's going to be one of those things. The end of the book is when the two meet and collide. Close curtain, fade to black, and then we have a war for like all of that stuff's really interesting to see how you take the themes that are in this book, how you take the kind of style and all that kind of stuff, and keep pushing it forward. I think it's something to explore.
I'm guessing that the humans are gonna get there, and they're gonna kill everyone, and they're gonna take the planet for themselves. That's how I think it's gonna happen, but we'll see.
I mean, that's the logical destination given what we know of humans. But I'm hoping that this is what we see. I don't necessarily have any reason to believe that this is what we'll do. But with Holston bemoaning how they have been living in the shadow of the old empire and repeating their mistakes, I don't know if he himself will have any sort of influence. He seems like a pretty feeble character so far, but if he's able to open the eyes of the rest of them to this fact, I feel like they might do things differently, and hopefully differently means not destroying all the spiders they encounter. And honestly, I think the spiders have the advantage here, so if they do land on that planet, the spiders will kill them. So
maybe
they're definitely better organized.
yeah.
Technologically, they're probably 10,000 years back, to be honest. If they manage to make the old empire technology work, right?
Yeah.
That's true.
I thought Bianca had also, I think it was Bianca, had found Wi-Fi. I think it was radio is where it really was going, but I was like, this seems like Wi-Fi as much as found this kind of wireless communication.
I mean, what's the difference between radio and Wi-Fi?
Well, I mean, essentially they're just different parts of the spectrum. You're exactly right. With that regard, it's just different bands of the electromagnetic spectrum. But yeah, it was just funnier in my head that she went straight to
to
5G.
Not yet.
I love that Fabian discovered a way to multi-thread the ants. Not multi-thread, sorry. What is it called? It's not time sharing? No. What's that? Sorry, what were you saying, Steve?
Oh no, I thought you were thinking about the beetles.
Oh, the ants, his secondary signaling system where an entire ant colony is only programmed to do one thing, but that's the evolution of computers, right? They could only do one thing, and then was it timeshare that came next? Yeah, where you could make it do multiple things, not timeshare. Anyway, I forget the terminology.
Child jobs.
Yeah, the child jobs, or do different programs. You can have different terminals, like multiple terminals connect, do more than one process at a time, do CPU cycles, distribute them. And then also he found a way to hack the ant colonies. I love that the ants are the computers in this world. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And all the computer parallels are coming up, and the evolution of computers is the evolution of the ants. Oh, that's just so good.
Never even thought of it that way. That's a great observation. Never thought of it. Never put in that context.
Yeah.
It's great.
I've sort of seen through some of his taking that he was really talking about the transistor. I sort of had some of those ideas myself in terms of that, without actually thinking of the grunt of the ant being the grunt of computational power. Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. Like, to see all the computer science evolution stuff happen to the ants, I think. What I would like is for them to discover artificial intelligence and then the rise of the machine.
It's already there on the planet.
That's true.
Yeah, in the sense that ants are intelligent.
Yeah. So it's not artificial intelligence
Well,
in
the
this world.
nanovirus is artificial.
Was
That's true.
thing,
That
yeah.
is true.
But
Yeah.
again, I think it's so cool because like this stuff, I think, is very obviously being portrayed in the book. But you could just read this just as a story, and not have that interfere with the thing. To have it entertaining enough on that level to just kind of be like a popcorn read, if you really wanted it to, is really a testament to some real craftsmanship.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're reading it as a popcorn read, I mean, you must be oblivious to everything. I don't know how anyone could read this without thinking about any parallel with society, or it's.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think at least the gender, which also I think is meant to be a standard not just for gender biases in our world, but all the other forms of inequality we encounter. Sorry, that one at least I think is pretty obvious and hammered home in a good way. The others, yeah, I do think the parallels are easy to see, and you would think that it's easy to make the connections, but maybe I agree with Chris that you can also read it without like not really thinking too much about it, because there is a lot of action to go with it. I think that's the bottom line. There's a war at every section, so if that's all you want out of your book, it's also there.
Yeah, but I don't know. You're reading like 1/10 of a book at that point.
That's true. That's true.
I just sort of wonder if, like, it seems unlikely when you first start out in this book, but if it's the kind of book you could give to a non-sci-fi reader and them start as a gateway into sci-fi, because as you quite rightly say, it's so obviously about human history, like it's things that people would recognize very, very easily within the context of like the spider evolution story, and without it being silly. So I think that's.
I mean, a lot of people have the weird notion that sci-fi is just like lasers or hard science or whatever. Well, if you actually read it, most of sci-fi is just reflections of human nature, and a lot of it can be like a lot of short story from Asimov, Bradbury, Clark. They're barely sci-fi, right? The most of it is the human element. There's a little bit of sci-fi and the edges a lot of the time, but some of them, like my favorite story from Asimov, I don't remember what it's called, about the couple in the train and the guy, I don't remember the name. But the extra story is just like, it's got some fantastical elements, but it's more like fantasy than sci-fi, I would say.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Before starting this book, before we started this book, if you would have told me this book is about the evolution of spiders on a planet in the middle of space, I would have thought it sounds kind of goofy. But I think it's pretty wild that manages to take it seriously enough that it all because it does, like if I would have known that, I'd been a little skeptical, but pulled it off.
Interesting. So now I'm curious, what made you want to read this book then? I didn't know about the evolution part of it. I thought it's just like already evolved spiders coming in contact with humans, which hasn't happened, honestly, but I'll do your question, Steve, before I get into mine.
Well, I kept hearing about how great it was from Robin and other people, and I love the cover, and I just I try not to go into, I try to go in blind on a lot of almost everything, so it just looked cool. And
did you know it featured spiders at all?
I knew spiders were in it, but I figured they were like some kind of antagonist that were scary. I never thought we'd be following their evolution in civilization.
Nice. Yeah. I think the expectation that I had, like, not that I wanted it to be met, but this is what I thought was going to be in the book, that humans and spiders interacting with each other and maybe figuring out their conflicts together. But I think the parallels, like the back-to-back chapters, where essentially we're seeing a similar thread in the humans that we just saw in the spiders, or vice versa. I think that's been a bit surprising for me, and it's been working out great, honestly. But I think I like it better than if they had been trying to figure out conflicts with each other. But
I also thought it was going to be more pulpy, I guess, but I didn't know. I thought it was going to be like, what was the name? I always have this problem. Every time I talk about sci-fi and try to remember an old book, I forget the name because I read them in Italian from my parents' library, and I don't remember the names. I don't remember translation. I don't know where it happened. Fuck. I don't remember any.
authors, though, you might
No,
remember the author,
and
maybe?
I was
No.
like 11 or 12, 20. And I forget. But I don't know. I thought it was going to be more like a sort of space odyssey sort of thing, pulpy, you know, those 70s, 80s, I don't know, John Carter of Mars sort of thing, where there's an interesting twist at the beginning of the spiders that have civilizations, and then you have this guy going in and trying to survive in the world or something, running away, you know. But pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, extremely pleasantly. Not surprised, because I've read another book by the author that I thought was really well done.
Okay.
But yeah, it didn't do what I thought it would, and that in a way makes me happy, because I think the other scenario would just have like battle after battle between the two until they finally come to figuring things out together. But have you read other books by Tchaikovsky, Dan?
I don't remember. I don't think so, but I don't remember. You know.
Okay.
But usually,
I only
if a
read
book
one
is
other.
widely appreciated and regarded, there's something there which is worth a read.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah. That makes sense. Was there any other topics? I think the spiders did some really cool things in this, and like the discovery of DNA and how they described it, like as a book that you have to repeat the paragraph in. I think, yeah, that's brilliant.
That was the book is the DNA.
I think so. Yeah, they figured out the nanovirus. They sequenced the DNA. Which, how cool is that? Like, they don't have Wi-Fi. They have ants for computers, and they figured out how to sequence DNA.
That makes so much sense now. Yeah.
And
but I guess because that's also the thing with Kern, right? Because it's saying they're not getting the correct signals to recognize that it's intelligence. But it's also a commentary on, like, you know, not every intelligence is the same type, and not every advancement is the same type. So you can be smart in certain areas. Just like how the Mesoamerican civilizations never had wheel, but they had very complex civilization. They just didn't need the wheel for what they were doing, I guess. Or they didn't have the pack animals to do it, but they were still very advanced. And it's very similar to what happened there. Very smart in different ways.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. I think we started out with like almost one-to-one parallels with human evolution, all the stages that they went through, but now they're diverging ever so slightly, and it makes a lot of sense for the kind of society and what, I guess, their ways of interacting with the world are. Like the fact that their language is through dancing, or like their feet movements, and so they need to build webs all around to transmit the vibrations. I think that's pretty brilliant. And there was a little pun, I think, in which Viola's notebooks had information that they had to read to get, I don't know, she was one of the scientists who had a notebook, like she wrote notes, and the notes were in a not okay, a naughty not book, which I thought.
I also thought it was a pun that they were communicating with, like, the spider webs. It's like the intranet, the web.
Yes.
Yes. Missed that as well. Good.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. See it through to the finish.
The notebooks reminded me of the, what are they called? The the way the Incas used to write things, they had like knots on ropes.
Hmm.
Oh
I didn't.
I don't remember what it's
Yeah.
called, but yeah. Like a completely different, and we don't know exactly how it is because it's not like a book or something that can be decoded, but it was a way of transmitting information.
That's so cool.
That's
And
cool.
it makes sense for the spiders, no? Because of the webs and the silk. Yeah. And I love their houses and that they live in these silk houses that we've all did Embassy Town together, right? Yeah. The travel thing that was it a Bianca or a Porsche, I forget who, that used one of those cable car things that she traveled in. It's a muscle that is just living constantly and pulling itself. So that reminded me of the organic things in Embassy Town, that like organic machinery. So
Can you imagine if China Mieville wrote this book? It would be so much more horrific and disgusting.
oh my
Yeah.
god. Yes.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
I
would think so.
really love the push and the religion and belief, or the belief in science that both groups are having. But I have a question for all of you.
Mhm.
If there was a battle today, if spiders and humans were in a battle, and these are the last humans, this is it for humanity, and they went to battle the spiders, who would you root for?
Do you mean in the book or like ourselves and super evolved?
In the book.
Fight all the spiders.
I was going to say, see if it's about our current life and we're not on Team Human. That's dark shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm dark, but I'm not that dark. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure about myself. I don't know who I'd pick if it's about us humans.
I'm definitely Team Spider in this. Like, I have to say, this is, if there were any fans of Babylon 5, I think probably talked about Babylon 5 quite a lot. There are quite a lot of parallels with that story with this one in some ways. This is not a new idea in sci-fi. This idea that there are generations of civilization and that they die out, and then there's like a new batch that comes along, and in that intervening period where the kind of new generation or new worlds are coming up, the old ones still have some sort of influence in that world. So it's very like that. But in all of those stories, you're always rooting for the new civilization, because invariably the last civilizations destroyed themselves in some way. There was some like massive galactic war, or there was something, and certainly in humanity's case, they destroyed themselves multiple times over. Did it themselves. It's kind of eerie because you can see the trajectory from where we are now in modern society, except just how this could possibly escalate. Hopefully, Adrian Tchaikovsky does a good enough job in this book of giving you enough proper warning signs of where it ends up to kind of put a stop to all that. But definitely Team Spider. Damn.
I think I'm on Team Human just because, how do I say, there's always that, like, the cosmic instinct that, like, the objective of humankind is to perpetuate itself, right? So regardless of if the spiders are intelligent or not, they're still not human, and the objective of humankind is not to, raise intelligence, but to perpetuate itself to whatever end it needs. So I think I'm still on Team Human, but it would be nice if they can coexist.
Yeah, the vast of humanity itself. Yeah.
Just biological bias, I guess.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought was quite interesting throughout the book was, and it was talked about in this last part, was when, I forget his name again, the G guy, Big G, that wanted to upload himself to the computer, right? And he was saying, like, because he was saying, oh, you want to live forever. But he said, no, I'm going to die. A copy of myself, which is not me, is going to live in thing, and it's going to, drive humanity or whatever. Like, that was also an interesting thing that, sometimes I think about, if it's a copy of yourself, exactly, is it you? Is it, like, where does consciousness reside? Would it just float into the other one? Would that other consciousness believe it's the same one? And I don't know, like, it's a weird thing to imagine. And it's a similar thing to Kern, right? It could be in the pod, whatever, right? Like, where is the consciousness residing? I don't know. Something interesting to think about.
Interesting question, yeah. And I thought what was very interesting about him, even though we gave that whole conversation about how much he wanted to die, etc., when the part of himself that was uploaded to the computer was dying,
yeah,
it's so cleverly written that he was going, I, as in that was the only thing that was really important about this kind of self-importance of him. So kind of, in some ways, removed some of the doubt from the reader's mind as to what his real intentions were, or what his real motivations were. Even though it's sort of flip-flop back and forwards, I think everybody kind of has that thing of like, I wouldn't discount this guy yet. He hasn't really done anything bad.
But was that a new I, or was it the same I? You know? Is it a new consciousness, or is it the same one?
Oh, I never thought about that. That's very... like a plea for life, you know, from the computer side of it. That's good.
I don't know. I don't think we can know, but
That's pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah.
But both in this case and in Khan's case, it seems like an extraction of their most defining ideas, right? Like with Khan, it was my monkeys cannot be destroyed, and it like that took precedence over her survival, right? She had the possibility of returning or being saved somehow with this ship, but she's like, nope, don't interfere with my monkeys. And same with Nguyen, it seems to be that his primal need is apparently himself, and that's it, his own priorities.
makes sense. Makes sense.
Good book. Very good book.
Yep, very good book. And what's your answer, Steve? Humans or spiders?
Gotta go with humans, right? Just have to. I don't know. Some of it. Just the home team.
This is a curveball. I like the answer from you.
Yeah, even if the home team does a foul, you don't boo your own team.
No, you have to be. Yeah.
You look the other way.
I think. Yeah.
I'm saying Team Spider, and I'm a man. And in the current Team Spider, I suck, right? And have no useful function in society, and I still want the spiders to win.
True. I mean, in Spider Society analog, you would be the female, I guess. Just like historically. And society.
Right? I know what you mean. Yeah. I don't know, you've never seen me fight.
Watch out. I thought Fabian's the end of Fabian's story with his death, that he was just like a husk. I thought that was very fitting, because that's usually what happens to people who are on the front lines of really big change, or these people who put themselves out there. I kind of felt like it was. If he would have died of old age or whatever, I thought I would have been a little bit disappointed. But I felt it was very very fitting. I think that's what usually happens to people who start these kind of movements that make these big cultural and societal changes. So
I was wondering what you were saying. Do you think that the names like Bianca, Portia, Fabian, are they a reference to something? Well, we know Portia is a reference to the scientific name. Are Fabian and Bianca like reference to something else? I feel like they must be. But I don't know. I tried to Google, but I didn't see anything.
The top search result has something about the most intelligent spider. Oh, Portia's the most intelligent spider, the jumping. That's the answer to the question. What is the most intelligent spider? And apparently people search for that a lot. Why?
Yeah, I think I read like jumping spiders are quite smart.
Wolf spiders?
Maybe.
Bianca spider species.
Maybe Tchaikovsky had a pet spider called Bianca.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a good question. I've been wondering that, but I never pursued it.
Yeah, because why do you think he chose to give them all the same name every time?
Oh, I think that's a narrative choice. I think we were talking about this some before.
I'm sure
so
you did.
kind of follow the lineage, from one to the other. I think it's so you get attachment to characters while having it evolve over millennia, and thousands of years. If they kept on changing those characters, I don't think you get as attached to the character lines in much the same way as he uses the freezing of the humans so we don't evolve through different character pool taming. Again, find it very hard to find attachment. I think how he's done both ways so we get tell a story over thousands of years and keep the same character cast, the same attributes is good. Plus, it also gives him the ability for his characters to meet gruesome ends. But if they've laid eggs, they're back in the next chapter.
Okay. I'm reading this discussion. It says they're all 4 Shakespeare characters.
Yeah, I was sort of looking at that as well. So yeah, Taming of the Shrew for Bianca, and
Bianca's the Tale of the Shrew, right? And Taming of the Shrew, sorry.
Yep.
Portia's the Merchant of Venice.
Yeah.
Yes, she is.
Fabian.
What's Fabian from? Interesting. Oh, should we make something of that? That Bianca is a shrew?
Fabian's 12th night, yeah.
And Portia's, Portia from Merchant of Venice, if I remember correctly, she's the one who gives him the idea, right? Like she's the clever one. No, she's the lawyer. Yeah.
She's the lawyer that takes on Shylock and then says about you can. Spoiler for Merchant of Venice if anybody hasn't read it. But it says you can take a pound of his flesh of his heart, but if it's more than slightly more than a pound or slightly less than a pound, then you'll be tried.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So she's clever. That's her characteristic.
But I was thinking that too. I was like thinking, maybe they inhabit the same characteristic and the same. But I think in a previous one, Bianca was the headstrong, like the big one, the very I don't know, muscular, but the very good at fighting one. So I don't think that applies. So, but I don't know.
Yeah, the Bianca's turned into heretic scientist.
Yeah.
Right? Chris was joking about spiders in a lab coat last time. I think this time I imagine spiders in shawls for the priestesses and all kinds of clothing.
I think
like a car.
I need to go now.
Yeah. Okay, see you then. Bye.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Did his guests come or did we scare him away?
Oh, the picture.
We might never know.
Spiders in their clothing.
We overdid.
That's what did it.
Oh dear.
Was there anything else about the spiders before we move on to the Borges short story, which will be interesting?
Oh, the only last thing to talk about is the fact that they're obviously trying to discover electricity, which is, that Kearns thinks that is vital for their survival in some way. That is the thing that their society needs to survive the human onslaught. And I was trying to figure out why specifically electricity as opposed to weaponry or anything like that. I think that's something to ponder.
Yeah, I wonder if it's hey Jared, I wonder if it's to make more communications happen. I think that seems to be Khan's priority. And this is how she knows to build communication. She's obviously not aware of the webbing and stuff. So that's why she wants electricity, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Yeah. She's aware that they're spiders, right? She keeps on calling them her monkeys, as in, that's the thing, but...
No, I don't think she's aware. There was a line towards the end where she says for primates, there is a significant mismatch in how they're thinking and how she is. So
yeah, because obviously they don't need the wheel because spiders don't travel like bipeds or otherwise. It's not how they move. That's the bit that I thought. Actually, she doesn't realize that they are spiders at the moment. She's just assuming they're monkeys.
Yeah. I think she's just assuming they're monkeys. I don't think we know. So, Jared, would you pick Team Spider or Team Humans if they killed each other? That was Steve's question from a few minutes ago. Whose side are you on?
Hello there. Right now, yeah, I'm on Team Spider. I'm all for him.
We're 50-50. Pretty much.
What have
No, we're
humans ever
3-2
done?
now.
Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. Humans are useless. I can definitely get behind that. Yeah.
A human wrote Melazon though, so
Oh, strong
That's
retort.
That's true. Okay.
I gotta hit the
You're playing dirty now, Steve.
yeah,
Okay.
playing dirty.
So we were almost ready to move on to the short story, and I was very curious to see what name you would choose today, Jared. But before we do, did you want to share your thoughts on this section of Children of Time?
Other than I had a absolute blast reading this. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys went over this already, but I loved how the society of the spiders developed over time, and I love how they went through their own kind of dark ages and then their own kind of enlightenment, and then how it mirrored the human history in certain ways, but was quite different enough to be its own enjoyable thing. And I thought that was just brilliant, and really liked that stuff. And like I said, I don't know exactly what you guys already went over, but
Well, give us your thoughts.
It was fun. Let's see here.
That's a big loaded question, right?
Yeah.
We only read 170 pages.
Yeah,
Summarize
just-
them for us, Jared.
Yeah.
Bring those notes out.
They had their own local differences. That had global fragmentations of ideology and stuff like that. And I was just like, how human is that? And I thought it was just interesting because it was just from such a spider point of view, where they still had their their qualities, where they would ascend according to, or evolve according to, how they viewed their dichotomy of, the females are superior to the males, and then the enlightenment is that this male has managed to kind of surpass them all in certain ways. And and it was just really cool how they did that. And let's see.
What
There
did
was
you think
one
of
other
the
thing.
Guin thread with the children running wild in the spaceship?
That was unexpected. I all of a sudden Holden woke up, right? And he's thrust into the situation where he's kind of captured again. Didn't that happen before?
Yeah, that happened before.
Yeah.
This, yeah.
And then I'm trying to remember what happened now.
So
The-
it turns out that Guin's been awake for a while, and he's got these people living in the ship who have lived apparently for about a century. There have been multiple generations of humans, and he's been working to improve the defensibility of the ship with all the old Empire tech, so that he can
That's
go
right.
take on Kern. And he's on his way to becoming his own sort of god in the ship himself.
That's right.
Too.
Yeah. And another interesting parallel between what's happening on the spider world and what's happening on the ship is, and he's creating this religion, even though he's not. They're kind of creating it around the idea of him, and the spiders are trying to either debunk the religion of the satellite, the Kern or whatever. They're trying to decipher the holy messages coming from the sky, and so it was just so well done. Just the contrast between the humans and the spiders, and how their situations are paralleling each other, and how, but yet they're not copies either. They're quite unique and different in their own way. And that situation. What I'm trying to remember is how it ended with this section.
It ended with Fabian asking for freedom of sorts, and kind of, I don't know if we know that he got it. Did he?
He actually ended up dying.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, he ended up dying. Yes.
It was like 2 years later or something like that, and
he was murdered apparently. Yeah.
And the Gilgamesh is actually heading back to that planet, and that was a great cliffhanger, because that was Kern's observation that the Gilgamesh is coming back, and but I'm trying to remember what happened. Oh yeah, that's right. Gian kind of got half into the computer.
Yeah, I think it was incomplete.
Get all the way. So I'm eager to find out what's gonna, how is that going to affect how Kern interrelates with the Gilgamesh in the future. We're coming to a pretty good point of conflict here.
There was an ever so slight implication that Khan is still in the Gilgamesh systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they briefly saw her face when this guy went into the machine. So I wonder if that will come back later on. And one last thing I wanted to say about the end is Khan is concerned for her primates, I should think of them, because Gilgamesh is coming back and she's worried that they will attack them and destroy them. So she seems to care about them, but I think overall the impersonal way in which she's dealing with the spiders, like she doesn't care about individual spiders. She's their god, but she just is forwarding her own purposes. I thought that was very powerful. Like she cares about the spiders, but again, it's for like she wants them to survive, but again for her own purposes and for her own experiments. So I think just the distance and the impersonality with which Khan has been dealing with this, and the frankly impunity with which she's trying to direct their civilization, I think it's brilliant. I think it's a commentary on like so many things that I guess humans build their civilizations around. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, she loves them like an experiment that she's been working on her whole life. And not as beings unto themselves. And so that's an interesting way to look at Godhead, I guess.
Yeah.
How does a god look at their subjects?
Yeah.
Are we just experiments? Are we just, So, a whole bunch of fascinating stuff to talk about. And the spiders kind of restructured their civilization where the temples weren't as in control anymore, and they almost became like almost a secular society where they still had temples, and some spiders were still trying to talk to the gods and interpret the messages and stuff. But so that was an interesting turnaround from on the ship where you had suddenly people worshiping Gaian and him trying actually to become a god in a way by having his consciousness transferred into the ship. And really loved that. It was so cool.
I like that the spiders were able to make more progress when they were able to interpret the messages without the filtering that the priesthood did of the messages. So cool stuff. Excited for the end of the book for next week. So are we ready to talk about I'm going to try and say the name again, Tlon Uqbar Orbis Tertius by Jorge Luis Borges. Is it Louis or Louis? I'm not sure. And Jared, I was curious to see what you would name yourself today from the short story.
Sorry, didn't have time to think about it this time. And it would have been a good one for this one. There's a lot of strange names here.
Lots of strange names. I think for me, the biggest question was if I would have liked the story if I thought if it had been written by a different author, because I am a fan of Borges. I've read not a lot, but every story I've read by him has blown my mind. So I was kind of predisposed to like the story, and it did. It twisted my brain into knots. It made me think about a lot of things. I kind of wished I knew more philosophy so I could appreciate some of the things he brought up. But I was wondering if it didn't have Borges' name on it, if it was a story that I would have liked, because I have concluded now that I do like the story, and a large part of it is because of the postscript. So, but without that, I'm not sure. What do you guys think? Quiet,
Stood about
blank
20% of
faces.
it. I think that's probably about my general takeaway of it. It was, like you say, deeply philosophical. Yeah, lots and lots of philosophical examples. Like if you, that's one thing I'll say that I thought I appreciated. Rather than just kind of give me the high level stuff, he actually tried to give some examples, like the ones about the coins, etc. You know, you lose the coins, but you pick them up on separate days. Like, what does that mean? Were the coins there all along, or did all of that? I thought that was like interesting, but I don't know. In a short story of this ilk, maybe it's because I've become preconditioned to read it a certain way, and like I read it from start to finish, and just kind of try and see what I get from the story in one sitting. I felt myself having to stop a lot in this and reread it again, and reread it again, and still only get a little bit of what he was trying to tell me. That's certainly the way I felt about it. I thought the general premise at the start that he did come around and deal with at the end, this idea that there was these volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica, which, if you're British, that was everybody wanted to be able to afford an Encyclopedia Britannica. Like, that was just the goal from parents. And if you got a set of those, you were a good parent because your kids would know everything. And then the internet came along, but this idea that Uqbar or whatever, Uqbar, it was only in one of these volumes, and like I thought that was a really interesting idea, and then have that explored throughout the story was like, yes, interesting, especially in the context of some of the people that she talked about in terms of giving their background, like a supporter of slavery and stuff. That he felt he had to add that in was interesting, but I sort of like so much of it went over my head.
Yeah, I agree. A lot went over my head, and especially the examples around language, I think I found very difficult to follow. But the overall idea of inventing a planet, this kind of secret society that's putting it together, the scale at which they have to work to make it happen and to make it seem almost cohesive, I think is brilliant. And one thing that I did wonder, the conversation that the story opens with, where they're trying to talk about, they're discussing what you can hide and what you can reveal to the reader in a first-person narrative by withholding information. I think he may have used that technique in the story, except I can't really figure out how or what he has achieved by doing so. So yeah, that's a puzzle for me. And yeah, this short story took as much time to read as the first 100 pages of Children of Time. Like, not that I had to read for today.
That's accurate, Marshall. That is accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty deep. But I mean, I guess what I liked about it was right off the bat we get this comparison of the conjunction of a mirror in an encyclopedia, and there was a lot of mirroring going on in the story. There was a lot of, you're looking at something one way and then you're looking at it differently, as if you were looking through a mirror, and that happens quite often. Like right away he mentions the misleading title of the encyclopedia, and because it's a literal reprint, and that's what a mirror does. It kind of reflects and reprints what you're looking at, and I like that, and I like because he uses a lot of symbolism like that throughout the whole story. And then we had when he was talking about the fantastical world of Tlön, he was mentioning stuff like, you know, the historical names they recognize are like the wizard Smerdis and stuff like that, and it's just so different of a mirror of our own society. And it was, you know, he mentions what was it? This guy Ash is afflicted with unreality, as many Englishmen are, and of course that's a mirror reflection of reality, and it's just, he kept going on like that, and I kept, when I was reading it, I just kept grasping at all these reflections of reality that were different from, you know, slightly different from what we know as reality, and I just kept grasping at all those things just to try to make sense of the story and try to get some meaning out of it. And there was one line that was great. It was there are many men adept in those diverse disciplines, but few capable of imagination. Fewer still capable of subordinating imagination to a rigorous and systemic plan. And I was just like, oh, that's pretty much what a lot of writers do. That's world building. And he's spelling it out as world building in a different way right there in those lines. And I really like that, because that's right after that, right before that, he's talking about the invented Tlön fantasy realm, which is seeping into our reality. So it was just a lot of clever stuff in there like that I think he's basically saying throughout the story that don't take our own reality at face value. Look in the mirror, look in the shadows, look around, and try to get a different perspective on things and what you know as your own reality. And I think that's kind of the theme he's going for. That's, I'm sure there's tons of stuff in here I missed, because it's pretty deep.
Steve.
Much like Chris, I think I got about 20% of it. Maybe I think there's some really cool ideas mixed in. The whole idea that there were two people, one person were awake, one person were asleep. Some really neat ideas that I thought were really neat. And the mirror thing reminded me a lot of the Manifest Illusion series. Partially, you might remember that whole thing, but yeah, I feel like this is something I'll have to read and reread and go back and really analyze it, because a lot of what you guys are talking about went completely over my head. but I did do a little bit of cheating, and I did look up kind of like an exploration of the story. I thought there's a lot of information I found, but this is something that kind of helped me. So for Berkeley and the four inhabitants of Tlön, matter or material substance, that is real physical stuff, doesn't exist, but it is merely an idea perceived by the mind. The book doesn't hold back, doesn't exist as such, but it is merely something I perceive to exist. Of course, the people of Tlön are fictional, so paradoxically they are right. Even though they don't exist, their world does only exist as a set of perceptions perceived by Borges and by us through the pages of the story.
Much clearer, thanks.
Yeah, well, I think it kind of helped me like put it in a context at least. Kind of like, okay, I kind of understand now why I didn't make sense. It's kind of, at least that put me on the track of, okay, I see what he's trying to do now. Because before I was like, what is going on? So,
actually,
really interesting. I mean, really interesting though.
It's a good point, because the Tlön stuff was the stuff that I really tried hard to get my head around. It's the stuff that I found I just couldn't make sense of it. Like, there was the thing about the language stuff you're talking about, Barsha, but you started with the Huron, and then it turned into a Huron of Huron, and I was like, Right, I can make sense of this. Let's write some words down. And I started messing about, and I was like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. And I probably am not meant to in some ways, because it sort of is a philosophical idea, rather than an actual idea of a thing.
And I think I could have been reading it wrong, but I think there were some things that contradicted something he said earlier. Like he said, one of the first things he tells us is that they don't think of space just as temporal events. That's how they describe everything. But then he goes on to say something about the spatial presence of objects, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't even remember the right terminology he used, but I either completely misunderstood that, or he's also like putting in contradictory elements of the world. Like, so yeah, I think you're right. I have to read this like 5 more times to remotely try and get to some levels of depth to understand anything he's saying. But there were some things that I thought were pretty cool. Just the other story that we read recently for a discussion was the Library of Babel, and in that and in this story too, I think he's sort of buried the physics and cosmology of our world in the cosmology of this other imaginary world that he's created. For instance, this paragraph in which he talks about Tlon's geometry and a little bit about its mathematics. He says it claims that as one's body moves through space, it modifies the shapes that surround it. That feels a bit like the description of gravity and how it bends space-time and creates space-time curvatures. And then that one is a little bit of a stretch, but this one I think is probably about quantum mechanics. The people of Tlön are taught that the act of counting modifies the amount counted, turning indefinites into definites. So, and I think I saw somewhere something that I thought was a reference to matter and antimatter creation, like the spontaneous creation of matter, antimatter particles that then annihilate. I don't know if we had discovered all that by the time he wrote the story. We probably had, but it was still pretty cool. Like, even if we hadn't, it was cool to try and read that into the cosmology that he presented for Tlön.
Yeah, it was 1940, I think.
40, yeah, it was. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not sure what. I don't know if we had just predicted matter and antimatter, or if we had actually like proved the existence of antimatter. Sorry, by that point, I need a lesson in the history of science. Some other things that I liked in the story were the way he used words for, I don't know the right name for the figure of speech here, but the mirror troubled the far end of a hallway, or the needle of the compass yearned towards north. I think there were some words there that had a very interesting usage.
It's a personification of inanimate objects, isn't it?
Yeah.
Having emotional. Yeah.
Yeah, I think personification is probably the right one.
There's probably a better word for it, or more exact word for it, but that's yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Jared, I thought you would have loved. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I like that line. Metaphysics is a branch of the literature of fantasy.
Oh yeah, I was like actually just about to ask you that. I thought you would have liked that line.
I did. Yeah. It's that was pretty cool stuff. That you're right. That part does kind of tie into his Library of Babel, philosophies in that story. That's kind of similar there, with all this stuff about this system.
Yeah.
And in aspects of the universe in this system that of story basically, and I thought that was very, very interesting in how a book that does not contain its counter book is considered incomplete. And so
right,
you had to have these, one book has to have its opposite in a counter book, and it just has that same feeling of categorization that he brought forth in that other in that other story. And so I liked seeing all that stuff. Still not 100% sure if I got everything.
Yeah.
Because it just seems there's so much here, and I'm very interested to hear more viewpoints on it. Especially like the line about literary criticism that often invents authors.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so cool.
And I was like, oh, really?
That was great.
I feel like this is a bit like poetry, right? You see what the whole is, but also you interpret individual lines, and you can come up with various metaphors, like what could this mean, what this might refer to, either intentionally by the author, or what analogies you can make using said lines. So I also loved that there are these two people who think that we have volume 11. Let's just construct the rest from what we know in this volume, write the remaining volumes. And what ex ungue leonem, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but that the lion from the claw, which I think is what he's wanting us, or what we could do in theory from the stuff that he lays out in the rest of the book, right? A story, like when he lays out the different schools of philosophy and everything, that like all the various ideas, that it argues that the present is undefined and indefinite. The future has no reality except as present hope. And then another school posits that all time has already passed, so that our life is but the crepuscular memory, and so on. It lays out about 5 different things, and those are just fragments that you could maybe spend entire hours thinking about. So he kind of wants us to build lines from the clause here too, and that's pretty cool. So I have this Penguin edition of the Borges collected fictions, right? And the introduction, this story was originally published in The Garden of Forking Paths. And the foreword to this, he says that it is a laborious madness and an impoverishing one, the madness of composing vast works. And setting out in 500 pages an idea that can be perfectly related orally in 5 minutes. He thinks it's a laborious madness. So, a more reasonable, more inept, and more lazy man, I have chosen to write notes on imaginary books. Those notes are Tlon Uqbar Orbis Tertius, and the other story is a survey of the works of Herbert Quinn. So he's basically assumed that some books exist, and he's written a story as like commentaries on said books, which is pretty darn cool as an exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a certain level of despair here too. Kind of probably dealing with the state of the current world that he was living in, 1940, advent of World War II. And because he says stuff like in the postscript, he's he's talking about materialism, anti-Semitism, Nazism, and how they spellbind and hypnotize mankind. And he says, how could the world not fall under the sway of Tlön? And there's a certain that fatalism there almost, like a little amount of despair that he's seeing all this terrible stuff in the real world. And
I thought the post. Sorry, go ahead.
Bit sad, yeah.
I thought the postscript was fairly sobering, and I think in context of the Nazism, the rise of anti-Semitism and Nazism, how he puts it, I thought I had it underlined, but the fact that people are resorting to spending more time, I guess, studying the history of Tlön and of an imaginary world, I'm not sure if I'm stretching this interpretation, but it feels a bit like a lot of these resulted from worshipping or trying to return to a glorious past that did not necessarily exist, or that has been falsely glorified. And so their fallback to Tlön as the thing of glory that they want to study the history of instead of the real world history. I think it felt like a parallel of the, what is it? I guess the religious, what's the word I'm looking for? But the groups that worship a glorified past, that's what it is. They're worshipping Tlön instead. So yeah, that thought was pretty sobering too.
Yeah, that I mean, yeah, he's bringing up that idea of the crutch of using nostalgia to to glorify a past that wasn't really all that glorious, but it's kind of what populists try to use to inspire a population to do what they want by promising the glorious nostalgic past as a return.
Right.
That's repeated multiple times throughout history, and probably won't stop anytime soon. But,
and the alteration of history, I guess, or the elimination of the less palatable aspects of history to study in school, I think that seems to be what the study of Tlön's history instead of the real world history might be about too.
Very interesting stuff.
I had like one last question about this. Are you guys familiar with any mythology that has this concept of the Ur? Because this is the third story in which I've encountered it, and I'm not sure what it is. I tried looking it up, and it seems to be the name of some city, but it's not used in the same connotations that I have seen it used. I think Steve knows at least one series that I'm talking about, and the other one is from N.K. Jemisin's The City We Became. And then this is the third time I'm encountering this to mean something that creates or that is the origin of things. But I couldn't find any mythology around it.
What was this again?
The Ur, U-R, that's what it's called. It's in the context of the word Heron and how that creates more words, and then the fourth generation is different from the fifth or whatever. Yeah, that's something that I've been trying to find more information about. So
I don't know.
Yeah. It's anyway. Is there anything else that we should talk about before we wrap up for this episode?
Yeah. This story was so far is quite different, I think, than some of the other stories we've read in this book.
Yeah.
Just due to the fact of its highly philosophical nature, but also in its seriousness. Because we've been reading a lot of fun kind of no, I don't want to say silly, but lighter fare in this volume so far, and it's just interesting that and I wonder if that's because the stuff that was coming out at this time period, that's what people were looking for, was the funner, lighter stuff in the 30s in certain parts of the world, and maybe he was writing in Argentina, right? And that's not. And down there, they just had a different approach to storytelling, and so this one has just this quite different tone to everything else we've been reading so far in this book. But I'm wondering if this tone is going to continue on in this book. How much of an influence did Borges have on what the future of sci-fi storytelling is going to be, and are we going to see that in this volume? I'm very interested.
That's why I'm glad these are told in chronological order, because we can still be able to see those. Well, hopefully, be able to see those things as we go and kind of see the influences on what came before and what comes after. So yeah, I think it'll be fun to see how it did influence.
Yeah.
And this is the first story. The previous one was sort of gearing up gearing up for an upcoming world war, but this is the first one that was written during, right, the Second World War. So I wonder if that also, because the postscript was written after the war, but I do wonder if the original is a bit more sober in tone because of the war, or we'll see how much it plays a role in the upcoming stories. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago as well, what it might look like. We didn't have a whole lot of stories from during the First World War, right? But I think we'll have a few now during the second.
Yeah,
so we'll see how those go.
And we also are starting to come into a period, looking ahead, of authors that some of us will recognise and maybe whether or not have read their work before, but actually know of the stories that they told and the kind of themes of their work, including there's even some stories here we've read in other collections and in other contexts before. So revisiting those within the context of time might be very illuminating for that.
Yeah, our best friend is coming up too.
Yes, but ironically the longest story in the entire book, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Do you mean James Blish?
I do. Or... That's exactly who I mean, yes, indeed.
Oh, okay. Because you could have also meant Ted Chiang, and Ted Chiang's story is also particularly long.
But we've read that one. That story of your life. We've already done it for the podcast, and Cordwainer Smith's game of Rat and Dragon is coming up, so...
Oh, well, that's cool. I would like to know what Steve thinks of that, because that story is all kinds of silly. Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm excited. So, Desertion for next week by Clifford D. Samak, and the rest of Children of Time coming up. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in a week. Bye.